They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
In the wake of the current presidential election, a multitude of pertinent issues seem to be on our lovely candidates and citizens' minds. Reducing inflation, tariffs, and illegals eating the cats and dogs on one side, and women's reproductive rights, sending more money we supposedly don't have to foreign nations, and falling out of coconut trees on the other.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
God help us. As important as all these issues are, it seems like there is one that has been completely and utterly swept to the wayside, barely even acknowledged by any of our political figures, particularly the ones on the left. And that issue is, what the actual fuck is going on with our young men in this country? Young men are dropping out of the workforce in record numbers, are exponentially outnumbered by women within universities, are growing increasingly lonely and disheartened with society, are largely maidenless, and are unaliving themselves, thanks YouTube, at disturbingly high rates. And worst of all, at least according to the mainstream media, they're identifying and siding with the political right. On a more serious note, young men in this country are struggling by nearly every metric, and it's absolutely broken my heart how little their plight is recognized or taken seriously. As somewhat of a young man myself, I'd like to delve into the why of these issues and shed some light on many young men's feelings about their current existence. Contrary to popular belief, we sometimes do have them. Get ready for my most incel tirade to date, dear people. Enjoy. And by the way, I am recording this on the day of the election, so I guess we'll see what happens.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends on this incredible movement.
Recent studies have shown that young men and women are more politically divided than ever, as support for the Republican Party from young men has drastically increased over the past few years. Why is this the case? Do men just hate women that much? Are they trapped in the proverbial patriarchal cage of toxic masculinity? Maybe they just need to go to therapy and talk about their feelings. Surely that would solve things, right? Wrong. First of all, let's ask the question, what do most young men in this country desire? I think I can speak for the majority of us in saying that we'd like to provide for a woman who genuinely loves us, buy a house, potentially have children with that lovely lady, and I don't know, maybe raise the next generation, you know, all that sappy nonsense. Unfortunately, these wishes have become virtually impossible to be granted under our absolute disgrace of an economic system. The average salary in this country is not nearly enough for you to live comfortably, and if you work part-time, minimum wage, or in an industry where work isn't consistent, fucking forget about it. The idea that you need nearly $100,000 to put down on a house is absolutely ludicrous. Like, most Americans don't even have a spare $500 in their bank account. So many young men have realized that this entire operation is a scam, and not to be a communist, but there's no world where you should have to work your life away just so you can live paycheck to paycheck. On top of that, jobs that men typically have an aptitude for are not ones that are regarded with respect within society. Factory and construction workers, plumbers, handymen, Uber drivers, etc. are relatively looked down upon by society at large, and more specifically, women. The status and reverence in the job market is reserved for white-collar positions in air-conditioned offices. Hard-working, blue-collar men are the people that make the world go round, not the assholes sending emails making more millions for a major corporation, allowing them to poison the minds and bodies of our people. The average working man is the hero of this country. Not Bezos, not the anti-intellectual who graduated from Harvard, and certainly not me. Yet the blue-collar man gets little to no credit for his efforts. And here's the thing. Why do men work in the first place? Why do they break their back for 50 to 60 hours a week? For themselves? I'm sorry, but fuck no. Outside of the psychopaths of this world, the only reason why men put themselves in these positions and accept these grueling jobs is because they have someone they love to provide for in their life, and finding that is more difficult than ever, according to the studies, of course. A man without love or someone to provide for is another lost traveler drifting into the abyss, lured wayward by the songs of sirens. Nothing but a ship sails torn by the wind. Anyway, as much resilience and willpower a man has, working long-term without being able to provide for someone else and share a life with is going to be a tough ask. And when wages aren't even enough to provide for yourself, we're off to a really bad start, to say the least. I don't feel the need to elaborate on this more, but the Democratic Party doesn't address really any of these issues. I thought conservatives were the ones who wanted us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Speaking of nothing new, let's talk about the complete failure of our universities and the education system as a whole, which, by the way, are nearly all leftist institutions. Women vastly outnumber men within the universities, on average 60% to 40%, and in general, we've seen a precipitous decline in men's faith in the institution of education. In the words of CharlieKirk, college is a scam. And he couldn't be more correct, but his reasoning for his claim is almost too logical. Like he and many others say, there's no point in going to college because over half of the jobs don't require a degree, you end up in tens of thousands of dollars of debt, and many of the classes you take offer you no value whatsoever. And once again, although these things are all true, I don't believe that this is the reason why men are choosing to forego the college experience or exponentially struggle within it. If you go to school in the pursuit of a liberal arts degree, which I did, it is genuinely unimaginable how entrenched the universities are within feminism and liberalism politically and socially. In nearly every single class, whether it's rhetoric, economics, philosophy, and don't even get me started on the social sciences, all you hear is how the patriarchy is at the forefront of every institution in this country, and as a man, even though the messaging isn't usually explicit, you are made to feel like you're responsible for how fucked everything is. Every problem somehow ties back to you, and I hate to say this, but especially if you're white. In the universities, you're constantly inundated with anti-man rhetoric wherever you go, which is fine. Like, I'll be the first person to acknowledge the fault of men within history and society, but when that rhetoric of the patriarchy this and the systemically oppressive nature of men in power that is forced down your throat constantly for years, when you yourself as a young man are just trying to do your best to, live, it doesn't really make you want to participate within the system because it inherently hates you, even though it supposedly shouldn't, because the patriarchy is in place, benefiting men left and right, and to that I say, where? I've been searching for the privileges of the patriarchy for years, and let me tell you, I've found more leprechauns in my life than the innate benefits of being a man in modernity. Unfortunately, this is a product of the apex fallacy, which many academics and women fall for, which states that because we have a male president, there are more male CEOs than women, there are more members of Congress who are men, etc., 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 that men ultimately have more power than women within society and the country at large. Look, if I'm keeping it 1,000, as the children say, it would be quite nice to be residually rewarded for men being in power because I'm also a man, but that's just not how that shit works. And sorry ladies, but the majority of men don't look at human beings in general in that way. Men, generally speaking, look at others with respect or lack thereof, primarily because of their actions, and sometimes even because of their character, morals, and values. Like, the idea of being a man's man akin to a girl's girl is just ridiculous to most guys. Like, why the fuck should I like you or respect you just because you're a man? If you're an idiot, you will be considered as such regardless of your gender. Sure, there are millions of men who despise Kamala Harris in this country, but for most of them, it really has nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. Case in point, those same men all love Tulsi Gabbard, myself included. Tulsi, why couldn't you have run for president? Anyway, the apex fallacy is so fascinating, specifically pertaining to education, because in every sociology lecture or journalism class, the topic of discussion nearly always reverts back to the oppressive institution of the patriarchy and how things need to change when you are in a class that is almost entirely comprised of women. I was in school in London a couple of years ago in a sociology class, and the same discussion persisted, and I was the only man in the entire class. Like, really? And I'm not even mad at that, but no wonder why I was the only male in that room. Most men are just sick and tired of being openly criticized and vilified within academia for just being men. It's really as simple as that. And to make matters even worse, let me briefly discuss how school and the way that we're taught to learn is inherently alienating to most young boys and men. Some of the most intelligent, talented, and brilliant men I've ever met in my life performed horribly in school, and it makes perfect sense. There have been a multitude of studies that have shown that young boys have an inordinately difficult time sitting down in a classroom, being still and quiet, forced to memorize the dates of historical events. And if you aren't able to sit still, be quiet, and make sure you're dating your agenda properly, something is wrong with you, and then good old Big Pharma steps in and puts you on Ritalin when you're 12. Like, this shit is fucking evil, man. Like, I don't want to hear about the patriarchy when reprehensible nonsense like this is going on every single day. So many of these young boys are just robbed of their mind and made to feel useless and inadequate when they're children, and in many cases, this affects them negatively for the rest of their lives. School is way more than just a scam to me. It is from hell and needs to be either drastically reformed, and if that doesn't work, abolished entirely and reconstructed from its pathetic ashes. Oh, and of course, going to college and getting a bachelor's degree doesn't even guarantee you a job. I thought that was the whole point. No? Okay. Oh no, wait, I forgot. You're right. Having an econ degree just to be a waiter at Olive Garden was always the plan. Last week, my best friend sent me this video titled "Trump's Angry White Men, Can Harris Win Over White Dudes?" and I almost crashed out as a result. The journalist in the video interviewed Trump supporters, and granted, they weren't the brightest bunch, but to frame men that are voting for the Republican candidate as angry is one of the most idiotic things he could have done. I personally don't really even like Trump, but come on now. The journalist then proceeded to interview so-called men who are part of a movement called White Dudes for Harris. Supposedly, these guys are redefining masculinity because they're comfortable with the idea of a black woman taking the limelight.
I'm white, I'm a dude, and I'm for Harris.
Tens of thousands of self-proclaimed white dudes for Harris joined a Zoom call to rally support for her. It even featured a cameo from the dude himself.
Kamala is just so certainly our girl, you know. I can see her being president. I'm so excited. A woman president, man, how exciting!
And many left-leaning people, and white liberal women in particular, are praising these men, championing them as bastions of modern masculinity. When in all actuality, this is far from what is really going on. Sorry for being so cut and dry here, but 99% of these men don't give a single fuck about Kamala Harris or any of her policies. The only reason why White Dudes for Harris exists is due to the fact that if you don't support the left-leaning candidate in certain spaces, you will be banished, exiled, and ostracized from them entirely if you don't capitulate to the views and the ideology of the mainstream, which is largely held by the majority of young women. If you are a young man and disagree with Kamala or any liberal ideology for that matter, good fucking luck having a social circle, say hello to your reputation being completely ruined, and you may as well kiss the idea of employment goodbye. I'm not even sure if the majority of young men realize this, but if they want any chance in society, they're essentially forced to think in a certain way, and if they don't, hikikomori maxing is out for express delivery. The groupthink, hive mind, mob mentality is so fucking real, guys, and whatever will garner social validation and acceptance is what most people will do, even if it means voting for a warmongering, genocide-supporting, incompetent idiot wine mom.
You exist in the context.
I know you may think that I'm being a little bit harsh, and honestly fair. However, my point is that the majority of White Dudes for Harris are contrived nice guys acquiescing to what society wants from them and the women in their circles. Typically, I would blame these men for their behavior, and I still do, but most 19-year-old boys are not equipped to handle and don't want to fucking live a life as a social pariah because maybe they don't vote for a certain candidate. But we currently live in a culture where outside of very specific circles, the institutions of universities, social media, and society at large have decided that if you aren't a white dude for Harris and in the business of redefining masculinity to fit that of Tim Walz, you're a part of the problem.
You know I give it a good loving, baby.
This is another issue that modern men are facing, albeit relatively self-inflicted, but an issue nonetheless. Modern men have almost no idea what actual masculinity is. We've very rarely seen it within our fathers. The depiction of most men in media is an absolute disgrace on both sides of the political aisle, and our current idea of what masculinity within online men's spaces is heavily entrenched within consumerism and capitalistic tendencies, and ultimately resembles that of what a 10-year-old boy believes what being a man is.
My onion? Stop to cut my onion. You're broke!
It's like, be a new man that wants a black woman in office because that and that alone, because some TikTok told you, women so oppressed, or return to the traditionalism of driving expensive sports cars, benching 225, and racking up a substantial body count with those oh-so-lovely 304s. And of course, don't forget to buy your favorite masculine man's course on cryptocurrency. Like, what the actual fuck are we doing? To put it simply, true masculinity is protecting and providing for the people in your life that you love, building an ethos that is predicated on truth, sacrifice, resilience, going through the narrow gate, and rejecting society and its parameters and expectations if it doesn't adhere to that ethos. Masculinity has absolutely nothing to do with how much money you make, how buff you are, or how many women you can sleep with. It also has even less to do with how much you can appease the thoughtless followers of the world who walk around with their eyes wide shut. And look, I'm not saying making money or getting your physique in order isn't something to strive for, but that is not what makes you a man. And even worse than that, with a movement like White Dudes for Harris, it's almost as of what makes you a man according to society at large is blindly agreeing with whatever is politically correct without questioning anything. That couldn't be a further departure from authentic masculinity. To conclude, I find that although the majority of the issues I've talked about within this video have been brought up every now and then within mainstream society, the framing always seems to reduce young men to these hopeless and powerless victims that are quote-unquote falling behind and struggling to deal with modern society. Which is true, by the way. But why can't we give these men a little grace and sympathy? Why does their loneliness or lack of purpose always have to fall into the category of an issue that they need to resolve on their own? Once again, men do have feelings every now and then. And when we're told to express them, but are shunned by the same people and the society that tells us to do so, no wonder why so many young men are not in support of the political left when the party seems like they're doing everything in their power to alienate them. And look, men should be better. Men should rise to the occasion, and ultimately we should be able to find purpose in this hellscape of the modern world. But unfortunately, strange times can make the strongest men falter. Even Aragorn hid from his throne at one time. I'll come back with a little more optimism and of course critique of all of you gentlemen, but for now, good night my dear incels. Bye bye.